This is an exclusive interview excerpt from What Lies Beyond with Matt Coburn. Conversations on consciousness science, the paranormal, and the post-material future. Visit us and subscribe on whatliesbeyond.substack.com. Bernardo Kastrup is the executive director of the Essentia Foundation and a promoter of a philosophy called metaphysical idealism, the notion that reality is essentially mental. He has a PhD in philosophy and another in computer engineering. As a scientist, he worked for the European Organization for Nuclear Research at CERN and the Philips Research Laboratories. In this clip extract, Bernardo discusses how his work on artificial intelligence led him to doubt materialist ideas about consciousness. The full interview is due for release on the 17th of October. Like, subscribe, see you there.
When I was at CERN, I was in my early 20s. And as I told you, we managed to build this data acquisition system that was as smart as a physicist, just a lot faster than a physicist, to analyze data and figure out what might be new physics and what is old physics and doesn't need to be recorded. Once you do that, the next question you ask in your own mind is, well, I made an intelligent computer. Actually, we made a version with artificial neural networks as well. It was not used, but we did it illicitly, and it was just as good as the system that was used. So you build this artificial neural network that is as smart as a physicist, so it's intelligent for that application. And then you ask yourself, what does it take for me to make it conscious? And I tried to answer this question for a few years, and I realized that, whatever I thought about, whatever I would change in the architecture, it would only change structure and function, and it would give me no less and no more reason to think that it's conscious. The engineering of the thing seemed to be completely detached from reasoning around what makes something conscious. And I realized that that was betraying a logical fallacy somewhere in my line of thinking. Because if you face a wall like this, it's incoherent. So you've taken a wrong turn somewhere. So I retraced my steps back to the last reliable point, the last point where I was not making an arbitrary assumption without evidence or a rationale. And I realized that the arbitrary assumption I was making is that a material arrangement generates consciousness. If that's what you assume, you end up with a contradiction. David Chalmers popularized that in the famous paper on the hard problem of consciousness, which I eventually read in the early 2000s, I think. And it was sort of confirmed for me. It was a revelation, that's the problem. That's the wrong assumption. The wrong assumption is material arrangements generate consciousness. That if you assume that, everything becomes incoherent, because now you change structure and function, and you're expecting to change the qualities of experience, which are incommensurable with structure and function. So I abandoned that assumption. And of course, the moment you abandon that assumption, you abandon materialism, which I always had taken sort of for granted without thinking too much about it, because everybody around me was a materialist. I was at the cathedral of materialism in a sense, CERN, where we studied matter. And if you abandon materialism, okay, then how are you going to live your life? You need a theory, a hypothesis in terms of which to go about your life, in terms of which to understand your own consciousness, your own self, and then your body and the world and other people. So for a few years, I struggled very hard, not to write a book, but to come up with a sensible, coherent alternative for myself, an alternative to materialism. And I eventually came to an objective form of idealism. And then I started writing books, first only for myself as a record, and then one got published, and then another 12 now are written.
So this sort of shift in your fundamental assumptions about how the world works was very important. And it sounds to me like actually thinking about artificial intelligence was right at the right at the base of that. Obviously, we're in an era where there are all sorts of very strong claims being made for artificial intelligence, like the claim that artificial general intelligence, or AGI, is just around the corner. And I understand you've got some fairly strong opinions about those discussions.
Very, because I see the developments in AI, which I think are a great opportunity for humankind. These are tools that vastly increase our productivity, and instead of leading to unemployment, what they should lead to is more recreation and philosophical time for everybody. So people have to work less hard. Unfortunately, there is corporate greed. So what people want to make of it is a tool to make more money and fire more people, so the profits get higher. But AI is both a great threat and a great opportunity for philosophy of mind. It is an opportunity because it brings philosophy of mind out of an academic niche and into the mainstream. Everybody now is interested in what mind is, and are these things minded? Are these things conscious, these AIs?
Yes.
When I talk to ChatGPT, does it experience what it's saying? That discussion is now mainstream and no longer a niche thing in the corner of a bookstore. That's a great opportunity, an opportunity for us philosophers of mind to vastly enlarge the scope and reach of what we are trying to do. It is also a threat in a very pernicious way, because it compounds lack of understanding to pretend to lead to understanding. It's like if you pile misunderstanding on top of misunderstanding, eventually on the top of that pile, you think you got clarity. Of course you don't. You just get crap. You swim in crap. You swim in the sewer of intellectual production, but that sewer can be mistaken for revelation and clarity. Why am I saying this? Because we already have this mainstream metaphysics called materialism, which is internally inconsistent, empirically incoherent. It doesn't line up with empirical results. It's not even logical. Has very little explanatory power, but it is mainstream. We think that everything there is matter, and we are also made of matter, and the matter in our brains somehow generates our consciousness. That's what a lot of people think. Now, this is the worst metaphysical option on the table. It's flat out and demonstrably so, but it's popular because of social-political dynamics that have their origin back in the 17th century and became exacerbated when the bourgeoisie, accumulated control over the intellectual elites in the second half of the 19th century. So there is an explanation for this, and it has nothing to do with materialism being a good option, but it is mainstream. Materialism is a misunderstanding. It's part of the sewer of intellectual production. But when you have a material thing like a large language model or a transformer of any kind, an AI, and it seems to talk like a human being and produce answers like a human being, the naive person on the streets would think, well, materialism is right, because here is something that engineers just hacked together, and look, it's like a person, it's conscious too, so obviously consciousness is generated from material arrangement. Now, that's misunderstanding piled on top of misunderstanding. The first misunderstanding is that materialism holds any water. It doesn't. Even modern materialists acknowledge that mainstream materialism is kaput. It goes nowhere. And the other misunderstanding is to think that a silicon AI, silicon computer, that we have any reason to think of it as conscious. It's a complete lack of understanding of what's happening. An AI does not reason. Engineers call one of the modules in an AI architecture the reasoning module. But this is wishful thinking. The reasoning module has nothing to do with what we call reasoning in colloquial language. They also have another module. I'm also an AI engineer, by the way. I'm building AI hardware right now. Another module is the attention module. It has nothing to do with attention. The relationship with the colloquial meaning of the word attention is marginal. It's even forced. If you understood what an AI actually does, it's a series of geometrical transformations applied on tokenized data. Let me unpack this. when you have text is written with letters, an alphabet, and words that we understand because we attribute meaning to them. It's a convention. We come together and we establish the convention that TREE means a tree with a trunk and leaves and root systems. We could have called it blah blah, and it would be equally valid because it's a convention. Now, an AI only sees blah blah because it's trained on text and not on what the text is referring to in terms of the reasoning behind it, the logical steps. And it takes these words and tokenizes them, transforms these words into values, numbers that populate a space, an abstract hyperdimensional space. And then it applies transformations, geometrical transformations on these numerical tokens. And then at the end, translates it back to words. In other words, it's purely mechanistic. There is no reasoning going on. There is no logic thinking. The AI has no understanding of what it's spitting out. What it spits out is coherent because it was trained on text written by humans, which is then coherent because it reflects human intelligence. The AI only sort of rearranges human output back to you in a way that looks like it produced its own output. No, it just applied geometrical transformations to previous human output. If there were no humans in this mixture, the AI would be spitting out incoherent numbers because it doesn't know what it's doing. It doesn't have understanding, let alone consciousness. So if you understand this, then AI will contribute to the defeat of materialism. But we got to a point now where you almost need a PhD in philosophy and another one in computer engineering to actually understand what's going on. Most people would just do a ChatGPT query and they would think, oh, look, it talks like a person. So if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? It's conscious like a person, leading to the cultural conclusion that, oh, no, we got it right. Materialism is right? No, you're swimming in the sewer of intellectual production. And you would think that you were at the leading edge of human understanding. And that's the great threat.
What Lies Beyond with Matt Coburn. Conversations on consciousness science, the paranormal and the post-material future. Visit us and subscribe on whatliesbeyond.substack.com.